One day, when I was working at the Louvre, we received an unexpected phone call. Representatives from Abu Dhabi were asking us to help them build a Louvre Museum in their country. As you can imagine, it was a strange question, and at first, we were a little bit speechless, and we didn't really know how to respond. Because if you compare to the commercial sector, for instance, the luxury industry, you might be able to tell me how much is a Hermes bag, a pair of Berluti shoes, or an evening dress by Dolce & Gabbana. But can you tell me the value of the Louvre, the value of the Colosseum, the value of the Sorbonne, the value of the Metropolitan Museum? Can you tell me the value of an exhibition with Da Vinci Mona Lisa, with Monet's impressions at sunrise, or even Rembrandt's Night Watch? These were the questions we had to answer. For many years, cultural institutions relied mostly on public subsidies, especially in Europe. But as we know, with low economic growth, we're all aware of the lack of public money and the lack of private money. What are we talking about? Public money in culture in the past 10 years decreased by 7% in France. In the UK, by 15%. In Ireland, 20%. In the Netherlands, 25%. In Italy as well, this country faced massive budget cuts in culture. Take the example of the US. After the 2008 crisis, public funding decreased by 17%, and philanthropic donations dropped by 11%. It means at the time that all of a sudden, over 10 billion US dollars disappeared like this. As a result, cultural institutions had to find new ways to develop and creative possibilities to fund their development. A new vision took place when the Guggenheim Museum opened its namesake in Bilbao. For the first time, a museum projected itself as a brand. And it sparked a complete renaissance for the city of Bilbao that was suffering tough industrial reconversion, and the magnificent architecture designed by Frank Gehry allowed then the museum to open its door in 1997. 166 million euros was delivered by the Basque government to create the museum, of which 18 million euros was reserved for the Guggenheim franchise. Since then, over 100 exhibitions have been organized by the museum. It sparked the notion that a museum could be franchised, and the sum of 18 million euros was completely unprecedented at the time. 10 years later, it became a whole new ballgame when the Louvre finalized a contract of 1 billion euros after tight negotiation with the Emirati of Abu Dhabi, and that's the answer of the question I told you about earlier on. How did we get there? we had to invent a new methodology. As far as the notion of a brand is concerned, we had to compare with the luxury industry, because its economy of rarity and excellence make it as the closest sector to look at. So, the Louvre assessed every sector of its activity, priced it with a markup comparable to the luxury industry, and finalized a contract, a brand licensing contract of 400 million euros. With regard to service providing, the museum had to reinterpret what a museum is. And when you think about it, a museum is a fantastic conservatoire of talent. There is a large variety of professions in your museum, ranging from curators to architects, conservators, engineers, lawyers, cultural managers, public specialists, security specialists, logisticians, and so on and so forth. It's a unique human capital. And so we placed comparison with the most prominent consulting firms in the world and negotiated a contract of 160 million euros to help the museum in Abu Dhabi. Was it easy? Was it a consensual choice? Not really. You would think that financing culture without asking the taxpayer to pay one single penny out of his pocket would be a good idea. But as always, yes and no. Some people loved the idea, some others had pretty harsh reactions. To cut a long story short, and believe me, it's 2 years of debates, opponents thought that it compromised the very idea of culture, that it compromised the level of excellence we have to place in museums and in culture. Some wrote of a malaise in museums and even the winter of culture. One thing I really learned at the time is that if you really want to innovate, consensus is not your friend. The matter is that you cannot bluff your partners. They're not going to pay a high price for cultural cooperation if the institution doesn't have excellence and recognition. The combination of these assets resulted in a series of many projects all around the world. The Hermitage Museum went to Amsterdam and even to London at Somerset House. The Pompidou Center went to Malaga in Spain. Museums created branches in their own countries. The Louvre in northern city of Lens. Pompidou Center in eastern French city of Metz. The Tate in Liverpool. And these are just to name a few. Internationally, brand alliances took place as well. If you take the example of Singapore, the alliance between the real estate industry and the Art Science Museum of Singapore resulted in a cooperation for Marina Bay Sand Towers. Can this experience be replicated? Can this open new horizons? The French Ministry of Culture last year asked for a report with the idea to monetize and to export heritage and the know-how in heritage. Would you know, just to name a few, that beneath the Louvre, you have a high-tech research center for conservation with a particle accelerator, just like in nuclear research. This technology and this know-how interested several markets, for instance, like in China. Another example, you would believe that vessels and submarines are the monopoly of the Navy. Take a look at this. A research vessel, a submarine for submarine archaeology. It has enormous potentials, especially with markets showing interest, like in Saudi Arabia, for its own submarine archaeology. And it started a cooperation between France and Saudi Arabia since then for this. To tie up this discussion, cultural institutions have real assets when their brand and expertise is world-class and recognized. These are real treasures. And if you want to keep your institution, you have to cherish them. And you need to use them to push your cultural institutions to new heights. Thank you.